everyone, this is Phoebe Russell from Discover Double Bass, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about working with a pianist and talk a little bit about where to stand with the piano in a performance or a recording scenario. So today we've been recording some solo repertoire with piano, and it doesn't really matter in a recording scenario where you stand with the piano as long as you have a really good sightline with the pianist. So I've chosen to stand here today because I feel that I can really connect well with Gemma on the piano, and we can catch each other's eye at moments that matter. But when we're performing in a live setting with an audience there, it's really important to keep away from the curve of the piano. A lot of the time, the curve of the piano tends to eat up the double bass sound, and you don't project as well. So what I suggest is you either stand here, a little bit away from the curve of the piano. However, it's a little bit difficult to connect with the pianist. So a lot of bass players prefer to stand actually on the other side so that as they play, they have a connection with the piano player. This way, your sound projects a little bit better. So another thing to think about is stepping a little bit further away from the piano, and that way your sound can cut through a little bit better. Most of the things that we have to think about as bass players when we play with piano is making sure that our sound can cut through. And I prefer to play with the piano on a high stick because I feel that we get a little bit more clarity that way. But it does mean that we have to be a bit creative with where we stand, with our position to the piano and projection. Another thing I'd like to talk about is being clear for the accompanist and making sure that all of your gestures are clear. So as a general rule, you really want to make sure that you're breathing and that all of your motions are as natural as possible. So Gemma and I are going to do a little example of the opening of the Bottesini concerto to show you what sort of motion you really want to use to be as clear and natural as possible. So the first thing I think about is preparing yourself to make a really smooth and natural movement. So I often think about breathing in before I start with the bow. And then as I begin the note, I think about exhaling physically. Not only does this make it a little bit clearer for the accompanist to follow, but it also really helps with the sound projection because when our body is really relaxed as we exhale, the sound travels a little bit better because, the bass is able to resonate more freely. So we're just going to do the opening of Bottesini Concerto No. 2. So you can see there that I've just made a really good effort to breathe in and sink into the string naturally. You don't have to do any sort of jerky motions. You don't need to, count in or anything. Don't make a big deal of it. Doesn't need to be a big motion either. It just has to be one that comes with the natural breath. Another moment that's really important for this in the Bottesini concerto is at the end of the cadenza where we come in together and the pianist joins again after a fairly long cadenza. We want to first and foremost be very demonstrative about where we're going to come in and also just make sure that the tempo is clear. So I'll just play the end of the cadenza and then we'll move into the part with piano. I choose to play the ending of the first movement pretty fast. Obviously that's something that you need to communicate with your pianist beforehand if you choose to play another tempo. So as you can see, the bar before we come in together, I just look over a little bit to make sure that, that the pianist is concentrating Gemma's great. It's not a problem, but you'd be surprised how many times the orchestra or the piano just forgets to come in after such a long cadenza. So just getting ready to be connected, to make music together, but also getting ready to be really clear with the entrance. So again, it comes down to breathing in and breathing out. So when I get to these trills, I think about making sure that my breath is really kind of relaxed, and that means that you're going to naturally be clearer. When you're preparing for an audition, it's also really important to know the piano part. So if you can play piano, it's quite cool to actually prepare the piano part, which is something that I do sometimes. But otherwise, just going through the score when you're listening to recordings and making sure you really familiarize yourself with the piano part so that it doesn't come as a shock when you get into the audition scenario. So I usually like to read through the score on my own and listen along to recordings, so I have a really good idea of what's actually happening, and that helps me to convey the music a little bit better. It makes me know exactly how to express myself when the harmonies are really clear. So I would really encourage you firstly to get to know the score of what you're playing, but also to practice with a pianist as much as you possibly can. Any opportunity you get to work with a pianist is just a really great way to hear your performance in its entirety and not get too used to playing on your own. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you want to learn more from me, feel free to check out my course at Discover Double Bass. You'll find all of the information below.